fall turns to winter, I always start to worry about pets who are left outdoors for long periods of time in the cold weather. So I wanted to share my 7 winter safety tips for pet owners. It's really important to pay attention to the weather outdoors, not just the cold weather, but the elements as well, the wind, the rain, and protect your pets from that. My first tip is to keep your pets indoors when possible. When the temperatures drop really low, and I'm talking places, I live here in Maine, so I'm talking places like this where the temperatures get below freezing, even below 0. You want to keep your pet indoors when possible when the temperatures drop that low. Don't leave them outside for long periods of time. And when you do have to leave them outside, make sure that they have a proper shelter that is built for the weather conditions in your area. So if you get a lot of snow, if you get a lot of wind, if you get freezing cold below 0 temperatures, make sure that the shelter is suitable for those conditions. So we're talking weather tight, elevated off the ground at least a few inches, especially when the ground freezes. You want to make sure the shelter's up off the ground. It should be large enough for your pet to be able to move and be comfortable in, but also small enough to retain some of that body heat that they're throwing off. Insulate the shelter if at all possible. That helps to keep the cold out and the warmth in. So make sure, if possible, you're able to insulate it. You want it to be facing away from winds and have the entrance covered with a heavy flap that's going to keep those elements out. The shelter isn't going to do your dog any good if the wind or the snow is able to blow right in the door. So have a nice heavy flap that's able to keep that out. You also want to make sure if your pet's outdoors that they have access to fresh water in that shelter and some food in that shelter. As when your pet's cold, if they're shivering especially, their body's burning more calories to stay warm. So you're gonna wanna make sure that they have more food than they normally would if they were indoors for the entire day. And you also wanna make sure they have access to fresh water. So you can put heated bowls in there. There are heated dog houses and heated shelters that you can use. And if you're unable to provide any sort of heat out there or a heated bowl to keep the water fresh, make sure that you're going out there and changing it and checking it to ensure that they have access to that fresh water. So shelter is really important, and make sure there's fresh water and food in the shelter as well. My second tip is to care for their paws. A lot of people don't realize that winter elements, first of all, and second of all, the ice melting chemicals that we see everywhere in the wintertime are really detrimental to your dog's paws. So after they've been outside, if you've gone for a walk or gone to dog park or something like that, wipe salt and other ice melting chemicals off of their paws with grooming wipes or warm water. And you also want to wipe up the legs and their belly, because as they walk, sometimes their paws spread those chemicals around to their underbelly and their parts of their legs. So wipe down the paws, the legs, and the underbelly really well with either warm water, or grooming wipes are really easy to use and cheap to have on hand at all times. You also want to equip your pet with boots if possible. I know not everybody can afford boots, and I know not every pet will wear boots willingly. So if possible, equip them with boots. That's the easiest way to protect their paws. And check their paws regularly for signs of severe cold or irritation from the chemicals. If you notice, the paw pads chemicals will actually leave chemical burns, and they may be just getting cracked and peeling from the cold conditions. There are paw balms that you can use. If you click the link below this video, there's information to all of the things that I'm noting in here, from the heated water bowls and shelters to the paw balms and boots. There's all of that information in the link below, so check that out. If any of the products that I'm talking about are of interest to you, you can find out some more information and some of our recommendations from Top Dog Tips if you just click the link below the video. So second tip, care for their paws. Third tip, do not shave your pet in the winter months. I see a lot of dogs who typically have shaved coats, shorter coats, breeds that you see shaved a lot. Pet owners continue to do that through the winter to keep that kind of normal look on the breed, but you don't want to do that in the winter. You can trim their coat, but leave it longer for warmth. When in doubt, if you think a haircut might be too short, if you give your dog haircuts on your own, consult a professional groomer. If you take your dog to a professional groomer, they will tell you when it starts to get cold, they'll start talking to you about leaving the hair a little bit longer for warmth. But if you do it on your own, just make sure that you either leave it longer or consult a groomer if you have some questions about the right length for your pup. We live on a river. We live very close to a river. So this fourth tip is really important for me, and it's something that I felt like I should share with other pet owners too. You wanna always keep your pet on a leash if you're around any body of water. Ice is something that's just really dangerous. You never know if it's too thin. Sometimes there's, here on the river, there'll be a coating of snow, just a really thin layer of ice and then a coating of snow, and you can't tell. We do know people, sadly, who live in our area here on the river, and they have lost dogs under the ice, and it is just a tragic situation. So make sure that whether it's moving water like a river or it's a pond, a lake, keep your pet on a leash at all times when you're around any sort of water or water that you believe to be frozen. It's really better safe than sorry. Fifth, do not leave your pet in the car. This is something that can be kind of a year-round tip because in the summertime it gets so hot, but a lot of people don't think about leaving them in the car. You don't want to leave them in the car either when it's too cold. If you leave your car on, a lot of pet parents think, I'll just leave the heat running. Well, then it can actually get too hot in the car. It's much safer to just leave your pet at home in the winter months. During the spring and the fall when the temperatures are moderate, take your pup for a ride then. If you're going for a quick trip to the store and you're gonna be in the car at all times, you can do that, but leaving them in the car if you're going grocery shopping, running errands, going to a doctor's appointment, be sure to just leave your pet at home. That's the safest bet. Number 6, check your vehicle before starting it. Along with car rides, that made me think of vehicle safety. And a lot of people don't realize that stray animals are animals that are just, maybe temporarily lost. If you live in a neighborhood, they weren't able to quite make it back home for the night, they will find a warm spot. Naturally, they will look for a warm shelter to sleep the night. And a lot of times that can be vehicles. They'll climb up, they'll get underneath, they'll get in the hood, in the motor area. Sometimes, especially if you come home and you shut your car off, everything in there is still warm. So sometimes animals will climb up in there, and you want to just be really careful. Knock on the hood, double check just before you start your car. Make sure none of your animals are in there and none of the neighborhood animals are in there either. And then finally, my 7th tip, be careful when filling your vehicle with antifreeze. Antifreeze is something we use all year long, but you see it a lot more in wintertime. People are filling their vehicles more frequently. They're storing it in garages or sheds. Antifreeze is toxic to your pets, so be sure that if you're filling your car and you spill some, you take care of that and clean that up appropriately. Make sure that if you're storing it, if you keep it in a garage or a shed, put it somewhere where your dog or your cat cannot get into it at all. Don't leave it down where they can get into it. Don't put it on a shelf where it might get knocked over. Make sure that it's somewhere really safe and secure. Antifreeze is toxic to pets, so you want to make sure that that is something that they have zero access to.